Tonight on Primetime Politics, a country in grief.
The Prime Minister will be traveling to the community on Friday.
Mark Carney and leaders of the other political parties will be making their way to Tumbler Ridge, announced as BC observes a day of mourning. Coming up, we will speak to BC Liberal MP Taleeb Noormohamed. His riding includes the hospitals where 2 victims were transported. Also today, pollster David Coletto shares his latest study into home ownership. The vast majority still want a place to call their own, but more Canadians, especially young people, feel that will never happen. We'll explore the impact it will have on national cohesion. And
each time we meet, things go well.
A newfound spirit of cooperation, but will it really get things passed in Ottawa? Our political strategists will weigh in. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. It is another difficult day in this country as people from coast to coast to coast express their grief and mourn for the lives lost in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. This afternoon, the BC RCMP releasing the names of the 8 people who were killed Tuesday, murdered by an alleged shooter who police say took their own life. The victims are mainly children. 12-year-old Abel Mwansa, 12-year-old Ezekiel Schofield, 12-year-old Takaria Lampert, 39-year-old Shonda Aviguana Durand, 12-year-old Zoe Benoit, 12-year-old Kylie Smith, 11-year-old Emmett Jacobs, and 39-year-old Jennifer Jacobs. Dozens of people were also injured by the shooter, some of the more critical cases transferred to the BC Lower Mainland, and that includes 12-year-old Maya Edmonds, whose mother has been posting on social media asking for prayers for her daughter, who was shot in the head and in the neck. Today, it was announced that the Prime Minister will be traveling to Tumbler Ridge tomorrow. He'll be joined by all the opposition party leaders, all of whom will take part in a community vigil tomorrow evening. Well, with his thoughts on what is happening in northern British Columbia, we're now reaching out to Taleeb Noormohamed. He is the MP for Vancouver-Granville, also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of AI. Taleeb, thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Michael.
So, you are right now more than 1,000 kilometers away from Tumbler Ridge, but talk to us about the impact this is having throughout the province, because certainly Canadians are feeling this. It must be very acutely felt by people in British Columbia as well.
It is being acutely felt in BC, in Vancouver, Granville, in my riding, and indeed across not just the Lower Mainland, but across the province. People are writing to us, asking how they can help. People are, Canadians are galvanized by this moment. They're trying to figure out how they can help. But every one of us, right now, the best that we can do is to be there with our love, our support, and our thoughts for the families, the victims, the kids, the first responders, the entire community of Tumbler Ridge. It's unimaginable, and in a province that has prided itself on being a safe place where we take care of each other, this cuts very, very deep, and people are shaken, and it has really brought people together. If there's a silver lining, it is that people are uniformly just asking what they can do to help and how they can hold the community close.
Mm-hmm. And we got a sense of that here in Ottawa yesterday when the tributes were being paid in the House of Commons. Can you talk to us about how members of Parliament are reacting to this as a group? Because, to your point, this tragedy reminds everyone at the end of the day we're all Canadian, no matter the political stripe.
Yeah. Well, one of the first calls that I made was to Bob Zimmer, as a fellow British Columbia MP, as an MP colleague, to let him know that me, and on behalf of my entire caucus as the caucus chair, I conveyed to him that we are all with him, with his community, and let him know that whatever he needed personally, whatever the community, just to call, and we would be there in whatever way we possibly could as colleagues. And this is not a time for partisanship, right? This is a time for us to all just lean in together and to put some of that aside. And you saw that in the most beautiful of ways yesterday in the House with the Prime Minister's speech, with the Leader of the Opposition speech. And I think for me, one of the most powerful moments was when the Bloc leader chose to speak in English, but I think it's for the first time he may have done that, so that the people in Tumbler Ridge could hear directly from him that in that moment we were all united. And in this, we are all united, and that we're there with them. And I think that's a strong message to send to Canadians. It's a strong message for Canadians to see that, unlike other places where things like this become flashpoints to tear people apart, that we are bound and determined to stick together and to work together and to put everything aside in support and in service of the folks that are really, really hurting. And I have to say, Michael, one of the things that was particularly gratifying to see is the way in which Canadian media covered this, how they gave distance, respect, space to the first responders, to the families, to the community. And you didn't have a bunch of political experts weighing in on theory, but really focusing on the hurt and the anguish in that community. And to their credit, the RCMP presented the facts that they had them, made it clear that there would be no speculation until they knew exactly what was going on. And I mean, I think it really, really, it dignified this tragedy with what it deserves: the respect, the consideration, the thoughtfulness, and the decency that every one of these victims and their families deserve at this moment.
You mentioned victims, and we know that 2 were airlifted for special care to the Lower Mainland. I'm wondering what you can tell me about how closely people are watching that, because the ages alone of the children that were brought down, it is heartbreaking.
And they were brought to my community of Vancouver Granville, right? A lot of them went to VGH, which is in my riding. And those doctors, those first responders, they are trained to deal with these types of crises, but nobody's prepared for this in the way that you expect them to. And so, they're going to need our love. They're going to need our care. They're going to need our kindness through this. But we are blessed to be in a province and a country where we take care of each other, and where the healthcare system is there to support each other in these times of not just every day, but also in these times of particular crisis. And, I am so very proud of the doctors and nurses in my riding who are the best in the world when it comes to taking care of these types of cases, and are there and are trained to do this. And I know have been and will continue to give these people the care that they deserve in this incredibly awful time.
Now, I know the Prime Minister is also making plans to eventually make his way over to Tumbler Ridge. I'm wondering the message you heard from him, what he shared with caucus about what your government is willing to do in this moment in time.
I think what he said in caucus remains in caucus, but I think it is reflected by what he said outside the caucus room, that we are all a family. We're all grieving for the loved ones. We're all thinking about the parents, the kids, everybody in that community, and that we're going to be there in whatever way is required to make sure that that community has the support that it needs and the answers that they need to move forward. I mean, this is one of those moments where there should be no space in terms of what we are willing to do, and the Prime Minister made that very, very clear, to give that community the support, the comfort of a nation.
Taleeb Noormohamed, thank you for this. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, to the matter of housing affordability now, as that was once again brought up in the House of Commons today, the Liberals have started a number of initiatives, but not enough, according to the opposition Conservatives. Take a listen.
Instead of incentivizing new construction, the Liberals are building a fourth housing bureaucracy called Build Canada Homes. For what?
Build Canada Homes is delivering affordable housing for Canadians. In just 100 days, they have secured landmark agreements with the provinces and the cities, advanced building on 6 federal lands. They're lining up thousands of affordable homes, grounds with shovels in the ground very soon.
Now, as this debate continues, there is a new survey out this week. It comes to us from Abacus data, and it concludes the vast majority of non-homeowners do want to own their place one day. But more Canadians, especially young Canadians, do not think that will ever happen, an attitude that could have serious implications for national cohesion. Well, with more on his study into attitudes around housing in this country, we are now joined by David Coletto, the founder and the CEO of Abacus Data. David, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Very happy to have you. Listen, let's begin with the big number that you highlight in this survey, because as you say, Canadians have not given up on the dream of home ownership. And there might be talk around that, but you say that they still want homes, but their belief that they can make that dream a reality is being shaken.
It is. And so, what this research and other research we've done confirms is that majority of Canadians who don't currently own their home want to. Many say that's important. Many believe that if they had the opportunity to do so, they would. But that first number that you showed on the screen there, many have basically given up. And, you know, even among young Canadians, those under 30, not a lot, not all of them, thankfully yet, but a sizable portion are already of the belief that it's never going to happen and they're losing faith. So this is still very much something that most Canadians aspire to. It's, I think, part of the vision and the dream of what it means to live in Canada and the ability to have a home, to own that home, and to make it an appropriate one to live out the life that people are hoping for.
Okay, so belief being shaken, but a very strong desire from non-homeowners to actually own a home. But when you dig even further, you find that concern around being able to afford a home is not only widespread, but also more acutely felt among young adults. Why highlight that finding?
Well, first, it shows that it's not just among young Canadians or those who aren't yet able to own a home, right? This, I think, one of the things that I've seen over the last decade, really, of doing public opinion research on housing is just how universal a concern it's become. It used to be something that, you know, I'm now an old millennial. Millennials were worried about maybe a decade ago. If you lived in the lower mainland area of Vancouver, maybe around Toronto, they were isolated to those regions. This is not the case. It's universal, every part of the country. And now, as this data shows, every demographic. It's much higher among younger Canadians, but even those who may have had the privilege of owning a home are looking back and saying, look, there's something wrong with a system where we have so much land in this country. It's not like we are England or a small nation with very little real estate. We have lots of it. And yet, why has it become so hard for people to be able to achieve this goal? And I think that's why it's also become a politically powerful issue, because it's not just of those who it's affecting directly, but many parents, many grandparents look and say, look, I don't think my kids or grandkids are going to have this opportunity. And that's a problem. Yeah, let me pick up on that point, because, you know, I'm going to ask the controller to put up that board again, because there is one more number on that board, because when you look at it, 70% say that the housing crisis is a crisis for middle-income Canadians, not just low-income Canadians. And you say that that kind of attitude could have implications for Canadian stability. What do you mean by that? Well, look, I think we see right now, broadly speaking, that, you know, whether it's because of Donald Trump, whether it's because of AI or climate change, that people are of the belief that it is almost impossible today to get ahead. And so, yeah, no doubt, if you are a lower income Canadian and you are on the most vulnerable side, you look at housing as something that you may not have or you might lose. But for middle class Canadians, or those who aspire to be in the middle class, if you remember those days of the Trudeau government, they look at home ownership as one of those markers, right? It's one of those markers that says, look, I think it's something we should be able to achieve. If you have a good job, if you've done everything right, that's something that we should aspire to. And, you know, we asked a question, not in this survey, 2 weeks ago, that asked Canadians, would you rather be born today or in 1950? 2/3 of Canadians say 1950. And I think part of it is because there's this nostalgia for that moment in history where it seemed possible to own a home. It seemed possible that even with one income in that household, if you were a two people with a family, that you could make it. I think people want that stability and hope again. And I think home ownership is often seen as the way to get there, and the most obvious example of success in that kind of environment. Now, of course, housing is a shared responsibility amongst the different levels of government, but it was interesting going through your study, because clearly what you have been able to pull out is that Canadians believe that Ottawa needs to show leadership in this, because in part they think Ottawa broke it, so they should be the ones to fix it. How should that guide government policy? Well, I think it's a reflection that, you know, even if, to your point, on a policy front, this is a shared responsibility. In fact, maybe the provinces and the municipalities actually have more responsibility. That's not where the public thinks it lies, right? And I always live in the world of perception, not reality. And when 2/3 of Canadians say, look, the onus is on the federal government. The onus is on the federal government to lead, to drive change. I think they see some of the stuff that the Carney government has done and feel good about, you know, the plan to build as many homes, but they're also, I think, signaling something's missing, because you're talking often about non-market housing, you're talking about purpose-built rental, but when so many people want to own, I think there is a clear gap in the policy agenda and in the rhetoric and in the language and the leadership being shown by Ottawa. And that to me signals potential risk, political risk, if people at the end of the day don't feel that the government has fully lived up to its dream and its promise, frankly, to make housing more affordable for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And you know, David, I know it's not in this study, but you're always looking at Canadian priorities. Where does this fall in terms of what Canadians believe any federal government should be addressing for them?
Yeah, we ask a question on, every 2 weeks, what are the top 3 issues facing the country or that you should think should be the top priority? And housing falls firmly in the top range, right? About a third of Canadians put it in their top 3 issues. It's fallen slightly over the last number of months as Trump and the economy have kind of moved up and cost of living continues to dominate. But that cost of living measure, I think, is still in part driven by housing costs, is in part driven by people's sense of an inability to both pay the rent and the mortgage and maybe get into the housing market entirely. So it has not subsided. And if you are under the age of 40, housing is one of the most important issues. And so it's animating younger Canadians in a way that it's not for older, and I think remains a really powerful and important political issue as, provincial and municipal governments are happening across the country. And hey, Michael, maybe a federal one later this year.
Yeah, maybe. And of course, we'll bug you if that happens. David Coletto, thank you for that. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Michael. Take care.
Well, the air of cooperation that we've seen this past week in Ottawa has not stopped speculation of a possible early election. And while no one is openly talking about it, the parties are sorting out what to do if an election were to happen. Take a listen to what we heard today from the Bloc Québécois leader.
We are not making decisions based on are we going to go into elections or not. Quebecers want us to do what is good for Quebec, and if it's good for Canada too, so far, so good. If for any reason there's an election, I don't have the feeling that I had in front of me a prime minister planning an election, but one never knows. If we have to go into election, we are entirely ready. We never stop doing the meetings that are required in order to be ready to go in elections.
The Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet. Well, joining us now are the political strategists. Laura Pennell, former advisor to Liberal ministers, now head of business operations at Spark Advocacy. Cole Hogan is a Conservative strategist, and George Soule is an NDP strategist, the founder and principal at On Step Strategies. Hello to all 3 of you.
Hello. Hello.
So listen, I'm not going to get too much into the election speculation. You weren't here, Laura, but we were talking about it last week. And based on what you guys were saying, quick summation, maybe, but probably not smart until the Liberals get more wins on the table. Your words, not mine. But that is exactly where I want to pick it up, because we're approaching the first break week of this year. We are just a couple of weeks away from the first anniversary of Mark Carney becoming the Liberal leader. So that's where I want to begin. In terms of the assessment of what this government has been able to do, has Mark Carney, has his government lived up to what it campaigned it would be in the last election, Cole?
No, I don't think so. And I think there's a few things they need to do to really, like we mentioned before on this program, demonstrate those wins. And there is a spirit of cooperation on Parliament Hill right now. So, the Conservatives voted for Bill C5, the major projects bill. They voted for the GST bill the other day. They actually put forward a unanimous consent motion to push forward the GST bill even faster. And they're willing to work on, I think Pierre said they'll vote for anything that makes groceries more affordable, and they're willing to work on the crime bill as well. So I think right now we're not anywhere near an election for all those reasons, because I think the Conservatives see that they need to meet the moment in terms of cross the aisle cooperation. But Mark Carney in particular and the Liberals, they really do need to demonstrate some wins on the domestic front, because there really isn't anything measurable that we can point to. They had a housing announcement that was completely buried by the EV strategy, because the government has only built about 7,500 houses when they need to build about 500,000 each year to keep up with population growth. So if they don't get any major wins on the domestic front, it's going to be pretty hard to go back to the electorate and ask for a majority mandate.
Okay, has this government lived up to what it campaigned on, George?
Well, I think I guess that depends on what you think they campaigned on, right? I think as far as their promises go, not even close. I mean, talking about the housing promise, their own budget is only halfway. Never mind what they've built, what they've promised within their budget is only half of what they promised in the campaign, less than a year ago. So, like on pretty much every front on that level, they've fallen far short. Ultimately, what Mark Carney really ran on was being the adult in the room. Hey, I'm not Justin Trudeau, and I'm not Pierre Poilievre, and I'm not Jagmeet Singh. Elect me. So on that front, he is himself, and so he's done that. I think.
So he's kept those promises.
He's kept the promise of not being those three other men, and so ultimately that is what he has been. And I think that kind of to a bit of what Cole was saying, and going forward, it's just. Can he do more than that, right? And I think one of the challenges they've had, and is both himself and largely the people he's put around him in the PMO, don't really either understand or have an interest or an experience on how committees work and how the House of Commons work. And by and large, in the first year, Canadians aren't going to care about that stuff. But again, if things aren't happening, if things aren't passing, without any of those wins, as we said before, it's going to be hard for him to go to an election. So he'll want to maybe hold back. That said, as we talked about before, with the economy maybe getting worse, Donald Trump's situation going to get worse, he's probably he's open to a possibility of it, which is why you saw that flip-flop with the Conservatives. Like all of a sudden they're conciliatory, because if they go to an election right now, for sure Mark Carney gets more seats and he gets a better majority and he'll feel good about it.
According to the polls, right? The polls are very strong for the Liberals right now. So Laura, what would you say about living up to the promise, really, and dovetail that with the accomplishments that you would say the Liberals have been able to accomplish under Mark Carney?
Yeah, but I think to the point of where the polls sit, I think he has been very successful, and he's told Canadians what he was going to do, and more importantly, who he was going to be. And that these are extremely, and I hate using this word, like unprecedented or challenging times. And they wanted someone who could roll with the punches and be steady at the helm of the ship. And I think that's what they're getting. And so I understand, and I agree that they're going to have to find some wins in over the next few months. These promises that they've made on infrastructure, on housing, and cost of living are going to have to start to roll out. But I also think Canadians see that leadership and that steady helm. I think people right now are very stressed at home. They're scared at home. There's a lot of noise on the news right now, and he gives people a lot of confidence. And so I don't think we should kind of discount what that is. And I think he's looking at this in generational wins, and he needs to find a way to find those more immediate political wins.
Okay, now you pointed to a couple of wins, Cole, in terms of the Conservatives helping the government getting C5 passed. That was last June. GST was this week. Only C3 really went through, in last fall and winter, and that had to do with lost Canadians. How much of that would be blamed on the Liberals? How much of that is an argument for the Liberals to say, hey, listen, without a majority, this is what the opposition does to our agenda?
Sure, but if the Conservatives help move parts of their agenda along, that sort of deflates that argument as well. So the Liberals know that they need to gain some steam and some momentum on the domestic front as it relates to housing, the cost of living, immigration. These are things that they need to address. Even by the government's last budget, they admitted that the unprecedented level of immigration over the last decade led to an undue strain on Canada's housing and healthcare system. So having admitted that, they know they need to make some different changes there in order to combat that and the errors of the previous Liberal government, because that still sticks to them. And on the Conservative side, obviously they've gotten a signal that Canadians expect them and parliamentarians to work together, especially as it relates to Trump and tariffs. So those are the two things meeting in the middle, where no one wants an election and all of a sudden everyone wants to work together.
Well, no one, maybe the Liberals. We'll see. George, how much of it is, if you're looking at what the government hasn't accomplished, how much of it is the government's fault versus the opposition being oppositional?
Right, but it's always the government's fault, ultimately. I mean, and I don't say that to be accusatory. It's the government's job to govern. I think I've said that before. I mean, it's a minority parliament. Your job is to figure out how to make that work. And whether that's working with the official opposition or one of the smaller parties, that is the job of the government, is to make that work out. And there's always a way to make it work. But if you choose not to, because you want to say, look, we're not able to get our agenda forward, this guy you're scared of is ruining everything, we're going to an election, give us a mandate, then things don't work out, because that's the ultimate goal. And on the flip side, that's why, again, the Conservatives are now saying we're working because they want to get rid of that argument for Carney to have if they do go to an election. So I think that's the dance, and that's one of the problems we're having. But again, to the other point, is that Mark Carney's only real job right now is to be the grown-up at the microphone talking about how scary the world is, and he's doing that relatively well right now. And so I think, again, unprecedented times. It's a very strange time when the cost of living is is hitting everybody hard, but more than that is a genuine possibility that we could be invaded by the United States of America. So people's focus is in a place we're not used to it being.
And I do wonder, like, to Cole's point on the Conservatives being, cooperative at this point, how much of that is strategy and how much of that is being lost? And feeling this fear of losing caucus members, this fear of the election, and trying to reposition. It feels like they're lost, like they're holding things up in committee and they're trying to play nice with these votes on division in the House. And so I wonder how long that lasts. Because they're going to have to find an identity, and they're going to have to be able to say to Conservatives and to Canadians, what is our value proposition as the official opposition? If all we're doing is kind of quiet and talking about some niche issues, what are we offering Canadians?
So if I can, the Conservatives can do two things at once here. They can continue to advocate for the domestic issues on which they lead, like the cost of living, like housing, like immigration, and also work with the Conservatives as it relates to things that will actually, potentially make groceries a bit more affordable for Canadians with the GST rebate, to actually get some measures reformed with bail so people are out on the streets committing the same crimes. So I think Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, having been very domestic focused in the last election, see that they need to divert their focus to work with the Liberals in certain areas. And, we talk about Team Canada, we talk about parliamentarians coming together. Now we're witnessing that, and we'll see if the Liberals actually like when Conservatives work with them.
Okay, so quick go around then. If we now have this spirit of cooperation, if in fact it lasts, you mentioned a couple of bills, but what do you expect to get passed? Because in my mind, I'm thinking that the Liberals have a bail reform issue ahead of them, they have a bill ahead of them, they have intimate partner violence, they have hate crime legislation. What here is going to actually move forward now that we have a spirit of cooperation?
I think we'll see, first and foremost, I would like to see an energy project presented and approved first and foremost. I think that would be a big win for everyone, and the Conservatives even demonstrated they're willing to vote for that. So first and foremost, an energy project, and I think, like the GST bill, anything that they can do on affordability or the cost of groceries, I think the Conservatives will support too.
Okay. George?
Yeah, I think it's all like the conservative-minded things that Mark Carney is putting forward, the Conservatives are going to vote for, and that'll move forward. And the Conservatives, again, he goes to caucus on Wednesdays, and they tell him, we like this bill, we would have written this bill, why are we not voting for this bill? And so I think those ones will move forward, and I think on the flip side, Mark Carney's going to be able to maintain some popularity regardless of that stuff, because every day Donald Trump says something else. And so while the House is falling apart and not moving forward, Donald Trump says he's not going to open the Gordie Howe bill. So Mark Carney gets to look like a statesman rather than actually somebody who's trying to get things done for Canadians.
Laura, what are you looking towards getting passed?
Gosh, I hate to agree, but
spirit of cooperation.
Spirit of cooperation. I do agree, and I do think they'll focus on legislation where there is that deliverable, right? They're going to need to find opportunities to show Canadians that there's either the cost of living is going down, they're building projects, and so I think they will laser focus on those pieces where they can get Conservative support. But to this point, what happens in the House does matter, but I think there is so much happening else in the world right now that the government won't be graded on their accomplishments in the House of Commons as much as we would love that to be that way here in Ottawa. A lot of that's going to be how he handles the next few months and the negotiations ahead with the president.
And just quickly, I think it's going to surprise us. I think that is true until it's not, right? And all of a sudden, at some point, it will become a thing that nothing's passed, or that accomplishments haven't happened, or that people aren't feeling that change. I think it'll be very slow, and then all of a sudden, where that shift will happen, where people will say, wait a minute, what have you done for me lately? And that will be, I think that'll come quicker than people expect.
Yeah, okay. Well, this has been the longest year ever, so who knows? We will see. Listen, if people at home wonder what the background conversation is as to whether or not you pull the trigger in terms of election, you just got a sampling of it. Laura, Cole, George, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Thursday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow. Until then, take care.